Yes, thank you very much. So, thank you everybody for coming tonight, and everybody on YouTube that's able to join us afterwards and so on. Thank you all very much. So, we're continuing with chapter 15, Leaving Home. So, the first part of the chapter that we talked about last week was the Bodhisattva. Um, Having conversation with the gods having conversation with the Bodhisattva, trying to encourage him to make his decision, to do the things that he was going to do to become a great holy being. But first, the Bodhisattva went to his father, the king, and asked his permission that he was going to leave the palace because he just didn't want to leave without, being a good person and saying something to his father. So his father tried to convince him to stay, but once again, the Bodhisattva, said, "Well, there are things that I have to do that you can't do for me," and and he stated that he was going to be moving on. So the king gave his blessings, and then the king went and gathered together the Sakya clan, the clan from which they come, and many of the Sakyas, the noblemen of the Sakyas, they didn't want the Bodhisattva to go. They wanted him to remain as a universal monarch and take his place as a king. So they were trying to convince the king that maybe they could find ways to block him from leaving out of the gates and so on, and that wasn't going to happen. So the king issued that there be guards that would open the gates and allow the Bodhisattva to pass through, and um, and so that was all good. And then the Bodhisattva met um, um, some of the yaksas, some of the generals, some of the other gatekeepers who questioned him and talked to him, and he explained his four aspirational prayers as to why he was going to take his place as an enlightened being. So he left the consorts. He was prepared to leave the consorts. They were no longer going to be any kind of an attraction to him. And he spoke of 32 similes of what childish beings, he spoke in terms of childish beings and how they would get caught up in different behavior of being an ordinary being and so on. So he listed the 32 similes for everybody, and then he also talked about the transitory body, and that there was this that this was the body to be left behind, the transitory body, the temporary body that was to be left behind, and that the gods were recognizing that he had been appeared to be on a path, and there was question as to whether or not he was still attached to this life or not, and then the god Dharmakaran gracefully let everybody know, all the other gods know, that the Bodhisattva was clearly on a path of detachment, and that there was no need to question any of his motives or his behavior at this time. So that's where we left off at 15.51. So now we continue with 15.52. So if we can all so what I would like to do is that we read for the next few pages to 15, excuse me one moment here, to 15.99, up to dot 100, so through dot 99. So we read through that tonight, and then we come back and discuss it. If there's time to move on after that, we'll see. But these next 50 or so verses we'll recite. So if I can select the order, so Matt, if you could begin with 15.52, and then after that, Gary, if you would read the next page. And so if you are reading and your page ends with a verse that continues over to the next page, finish the verse. And then the person reading that next page will start at the conclusion of that verse and continue on. So if Matt, if you begin, then Gary, then Alex is not responding. So then Bernie, if you can read the third page, please. And then I'll read the fourth page, and then we'll continue in that order. Matt, Gary, Bernie, and myself. I think Zara is going to come in. She said she was running a little bit late. So if she wants to read, we can put her into the group. So does anybody have any questions or comments before we get started? Anything we discussed in the past or something that you want to bring up that we haven't discussed?
Lance, I just want to say it's Alex. I joined a bit late, but I don't have a text yet with me, so I'll be listening again.
Okay. Well, thank you, Alex. Yes, thank you. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so then if we can begin, Matt, when you're ready.
Monks, indeed the Bodhisattva had become certain. He was filled with distaste and made up his mind. So without any delay, he gracefully rose from his seat in the music hall and turned towards the east. With his right hand, he parted the bejeweled lattice and went on to the palace roof. There he folded his hands, recalling all the Buddhas. He bowed to them. When he looked up into the expanse of space, he saw Indra, the 1,000-eyed lord of the gods, with a retinue of 100,000 gods, holding flowers, incense, garlands, perfumes, scented powder, garments, parasols, victory banners, flags, earrings made of flowers, and garlands made of precious stones. Bowing before him, Indra paid his respect to the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva also saw the four guardians of the world together with hordes of yaksas, demons, Gandharvas, and Nagas. They all wore solid armor, corselets, and helmets. In their arms they held swords, bows and arrows, spears, javelins, and tridents. They gracefully took off their bejeweled diadems and crowns and bowed before the Bodhisattva. Then he saw two gods, Surya and Chandra, standing on his right and left sides. Pusya, the chief of all constellations, was also seen standing by. Seeing that it was now midnight, the Bodhisattva called upon Chanda. All the
If I can interrupt just for a second, just for clarity. Surya is the god of the sun, and Chandra is the personification, the god of the moon. But then Chandra, who you just read that name, Chandra, Chanda, is his charioteer. So I just want to point that out that we don't get those confused.
Got it. Okay.
So please, and now that Zara is with us, hi Zara, are you in a position, do you want to read tonight?
I would love to read, yeah.
Okay, well then fine. So if after Bernie reads, if you can read in that order, okay? So
Okay,
so
sounds great.
he'll be the third person to read. You'll be the fourth, and I'll be the fifth.
Great.
Okay, I'm sorry, Matt. Please continue.
Cool. All the auspicious signs have come together. Without a doubt, I will accomplish my wishes tonight. Chanda, don't vacillate or delay. Ornament the king of horses and bring it bedecked to me. When Chanda heard these words, he felt sad and asked, "Where are you going, you whose eyebrows are long and who has eyes as beautiful as blooming lotuses, a lion among men with a face like the autumn moon?" the moon that delights the lotuses of the night. Your face is like a blooming white lotus. It is as tender as a young blue lotus. Your splendor is like that of the sun, or well-purified gold. It is like the newly risen and stainless moon, like the fire whose flames are fed by the sacrificial butter. Your splendor is like a blazing flash of lightning. Your invincible gait is as graceful as that of a confident elephant. You walk and place your feet beautifully, with the gait of a bull, a lion, or a swan. The Bodhisattva replied, Chanda, tell me, for what purpose then have I in the past forsaken my arms and legs and eyes? I have given up my head and my beloved wife and children, my kingdom, wealth, gold, and clothes.
Elephants and horses laden with chills, swift as the wind and of great power, for trillions of eons I have trained in discipline and patience, delighting in diligence, powers, concentration, and knowledge. Therefore, once I attain the auspicious peace of awakening, the time has come for me to free beings drowning in the ocean of old age and death. Chanda replied, I have heard, my lord, that when you were born, you were brought to the priests who are skilled in making predictions based on examining signs. They prophesied before your father, King Suddhodana, Your Majesty, your royal line will flourish. When King Suddhodana inquired further, the priest replied, Your newborn son possesses 100 marks of merit and blazes with the splendor of merit. He will become a universal monarch, ruling over the 4 continents, and he will possess the 7 treasures. However, if he is confronted with the miseries of this world, he will abandon his retinue of consorts and leave his home. Then he will attain awakening, a state free from old age and death. He will satisfy beings with the water of the Dharma. My Lord, there is this prophecy, and it cannot be denied. But please listen to what I have to say. I may be able to help you. How so? Asked the Bodhisattva. Chanda replied, My Lord, why is it that some people go through disciplined actions and practice austerities? They wear deerskin and tie their hair in a top knot. They wear garments made of tree bark. They let their nails, hair, and beard grow long. They take pleasure in torturing their bodies and go through various difficult torments. They take up the harshest of austerities because, as they say, they wish to attain the best among gods and humans. But you, Lord, you already possess this good fortune. The kingdom is prosperous, large, and peaceful, with excellent harvests. It is delightful, filled with many people. Your parks are the best of the best, full of flowers and fruits, and resounding with the singing of birds. There are beautiful ponds with the blue, pink, and white lotus flowers, and they resound with the cries of swans, peacocks, cuckoos, wild ducks, storks, and whooper swans. There are many flowering trees growing around the lakes, such as mango, asoka, kampaka, amaranth, and saffron trees. The parks are adorned with groves of jeweled trees that are arranged like chessboards and surrounded by jeweled platforms. One sees jeweled lattices hanging everywhere. The parks can be enjoyed during any season, and they are pleasant to visit, whether it is the hot season, the rainy season, autumn, or winter.
Your palaces are like the palace of Vajrayanta, where one finds the peace of the true Dharma, and all one's worries are gone. Since your palaces are the color of autumn clouds, they resemble Mount Kailasha. They are adorned with verandas, arches, portals, windows, cooling terraces, and the top floor terraces. They resound with the tinkling of tiny bejeweled bells on latticed draperies. Your retinue of consorts is well trained. They sing songs while playing melodious music and dancing. They play tunes, panavas, flutes, lutes, wood kettle drums, reed pipes, wooden pins, cymbals, kimpalas, nakalus, guitars, clay kettle drums with a good sound, and patahas. They attend upon you with comedy and dance, playful, enjoyable, and happy and sweet. And you, my Lord, are still young. Right? Okay. You are in the prime of your life. You are fresh and a tender boy with black hair and the body of like a lotus. You have not yet given yourself to the pleasures of the senses. So now enjoy yourself like the Lord in the heavens of the three, the Lord of the gods, the one endowed with 1,000 eyes. We can always leave our homes later once we are old. At that moment, Chanda spoke the following verse. You know the techniques of enjoyment, so relish them. Like the powerful Lord of gods in the heavens of the 33, later when we are old, we can practice disciplined conduct and austerities. But the Bodhisattva replied, enough, Chanda. These sense pleasures are impermanent and unstable. They do not endure and are subject to change. Like the rapids of a mountain torrent, they quickly pass and are turbulent. Like dewdrops, they do not last. Like an empty fist that tricks a child, they have no substance. Like the core of a plantain tree, they have no strength. Like a vase of unbaked clay, they naturally break. Like autumn clouds, they appear one moment and vanish the next. Like a flash of lightning in the sky, they last for just the briefest time. Like a vessel filled with poison, they cause pain. Like poison ivy, they bring discomfort.
The objects of desire which are desperately craved by all all those with immature minds are like water bubbles, always changing, like a mirage. They are caused by mistaken perception. They are like hallucination that has come about through false thinking. Just like dreams, they cannot satisfy. Since one is grasping at a false appearance, just as it is difficult to fill the oceans, desires can never be fulfilled. Like salty water, objects of desire only make you thirstier. Like the hat of a viper, they are dangerous to touch. Like a deep abyss, they are abandoned entirely by wise people. They produce anxiety, cause strife, and generate distress and faults. Knowing this, the wise ones avoid them, the clever ones deplore them, the noble ones abhor them, and the intelligent ones disparage them. Yet the ignorant embrace them, and the immature rely on them. That moment, he spoke the following verses. Wise people avoid the sense pleasures like the head of a snake. They drop them like a filthy vessel filled with excrement. Chanda, since I understand that sense pleasures destroy all virtue, I do not enjoy them. Then Chanda, wailing as if in sharp pain, with tearful eyes and stricken with agony, exclaimed the following verses. Why do some persevere in many austerities? They wear deerskin and let their hair, beard, and nails grow long. They cover themselves in tree bark, adhering to the practices of austerities. Many have emaciated bodies. Some eat only vegetables, millet, and the gardula plant. Others have vowed to adopt the behavior of a cow, always keep their heads down. We, however, should become the best and most distinguished in the world. We should be supreme, universal monarchs and guardians of the world, or Vajra holders like Sakra, or the chief god and the heaven free from strife. Aspiring to experience the bliss of meditation in the realm of Brahma, perfect being, your kingdom is wealthy, flourishing with excellent harvests, full of parks and palaces. It equals the Vajrayanta palace. These ladies are well trained in offering pleasures in combination with song and the melodious sounds of lutes and reed pipes. Enjoy these pleasures, my lord. If you do not leave, you will experience great delights. The Bodhisattva answered, listen, Chanda. In previous births, I've endured hundreds of sufferings, imprisonment, slavery, beatings, threats, all on account of desire. When my mind was fixed on conditioned things, I could not gain liberation.
Under the sway of carelessness and overcome by delusion, I was blind in the past, covered with a veil of wrong views. Such views made me grasp at the notion of a self and perpetuate the experience of sensations, all due to not knowing the Dharma. All things move and change and are impermanent like clouds. They may be likened to a flash of lightning. They are like a dewdrop on a blade of grass, and deceptive like an empty fist. They have no essence and no self, and lack intrinsic existence in every way. So my mind is not attached to objects anymore. Chanda, bring me Kantatka, well adorned, the supreme king of all horses. My auspicious aspirations from the past shall have been fulfilled. Overcoming everything, I will become a master of all phenomena, a king of Dharma, a sage. Chanda replied, don't you see these women with eyes like blooming lotuses, who are adorned with garlands of many precious gems, sparkling like a flash of lightning amid clouds, banks in the sky, so beautiful as they rest on their beds? Or those who play such sweet-sounding flutes and cymbals, clay drums and reed pipes, making music and song, accompanied by the sounds of partridge, peacocks, and cuckoos. Are you going to abandon this place, which is like a city of Kanahars? Here, as many flowers, such as jasmine, blue lotuses, coral jasmine, and kampakas, and fragrant garlands with masses of fine blossoms. We have perfectly scented incense made of black aloe wood and sublime scented ointments. Do you not see all of this? Here you get the finest cuisine and the best dishes, with exquisite flavors emitting superb aromas, along with the sweetest beverages. Do you not see them, my lord? Where will you go?
Here your garments are scented in the cold season with warming oils, and in the hot season with sandalwood. You have beautiful, fine, silken clothing. Do you not see them, my lord? Where will you go? Here are the 5 sense pleasures, as exquisite as the divine pleasures in the God realms. Now, enjoy and revel in them with delight and bliss. Then later, noble lord of the Sakyas, you can retreat to the forest. The Bodhisattva replied, Chanda, for countless eons beyond measure, I have enjoyed the many sense pleasures of humans and gods. In the manner of forms, sounds, smells, tastes, and textures, yet I have failed to become satisfied. I have been a supreme royal son, so rich in power. I have been a universal monarch, ruling over the 4 continents. I possessed the 7 treasures, and I lived in the midst of ladies. I ruled over the heaven of the 33 and the heaven free from strife. I left those realms and came here. In the past, I enjoyed the most sacred and superb objects among the gods of emanations. I have been the lord of demons who controls the realms of gods. I have enjoyed the best and most exquisite sense pleasures, but found no satisfaction. How then would I find satisfaction now by indulging in inferior pleasures? This is out of the question. Moreover, Chanda, I see that this world is suffering. It is caught in the midst of cyclic existence. It is a wilderness of misery, full of afflictions and evil, where beings are constantly swept away. Without refuge or purpose, beings wander in the darkness of ignorance and delusion. They suffer from the terrors of old age, sickness, and death. They are assailed by the sufferings attendant upon taking birth, and they suffer the onslaughts of enemies.
Now a symbol, the ship of Dharma. It is constructed with the strongest wood, giving disciplined conduct, patience, intelligence, and firmly secured by my indestructible superior motivation. It is my resolve to board that ship and cross the ocean of cyclic existence. Then I will ferry innumerable beings across this ocean. This sea of suffering so hard to cross with its waves of anger, monsters of passion, and maelstroms of enmity. I will cross the ocean of existence, infested with the monsters of harmful views and the demons of affliction. Once I have ferried innumerable beings across, I will establish them on the auspicious dry land without old age or death. At that time, Chanda, who now cried even harder, exclaimed, Lord, is your resolve based on conviction? The Bodhisattva replied, Chanda, listen to this about my resolve. I will strive to benefit and liberate beings. My resolve is like a mountain immutable, unchangeable, and firm. It is difficult to move as Meru, the king of mountains. Chanda then asked, Lord, how can you be so certain? The Bodhisattva replied, even if the bolts of lightning, battle axes, spears, and arrows were to rain upon me, and if molten iron, blazing like a fork of lightning, and an erupting volcano were to drop on my head, I would never want to be a householder again. At this moment, the gods who were watching from the sky uttered cries of joy and rained down flowers, exclaiming, with a mind not attached to any object, and with compassion and love for sentient beings, may you, the one with supreme intelligence, be victorious. You are the protector who grants fearlessness to beings, like the sky which remains unattached to darkness, dust, smoke, or comets. The mind of the Supreme Being remains unattached. The pure being is unstained by pleasurable objects, just like a lotus rising up from the water.
All right, well, thank you. Well, this is quite self-explanatory, I think. Does anybody have any comments about any of the conversation that's going on here between the Bodhisattva and the different and Chanda? Because I think the dialogue really is between the two of them, isn't it?
Lance, I found this chapter really, or this section, like very practical even now, right? Like I could see myself having this type of conversation with someone right now. Like, like I know the semantics are specific to that style, but like where someone's saying, oh, you'll be fine. You can start this, delay this a little bit. And so, I mean, to me, it's just really is a testament to the power of these scriptures. I
So
find
so you can see yourself as the Bodhisattva, and I don't mean
yeah,
not to be,
yes,
and
yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah, and I think more so even these sutras, these scriptures, I guess, are still applicable is what I'm saying, even now, right? Like the universality and applicability of them are so profound. Like I could read that and be like, especially the description of the senses, right? The deception of the senses as they're going back and forth, and as he's talking to Chanda. And Chanda's coming back with every single curveball. And I'm like, that happens all the time, right? Where people are constantly, we all have Chandas in our life, right? Versions of that, including our ego, Mara. So it's really, I felt profound. And I read that a couple times, and I was going through a difficult moment recently when I was traveling. And I just was like, there it is. It is like, especially the one section that talks about the ignorant and the unwise, like how they're victims of their senses. And so I was like, that's it. That's really everything. So this was just this whole chapter is very moving, but this particular area was, I just love it. So thank you for having us read it out loud.
Oh, very good. Thank you. No, I think it's great. Any other comments?
The similar parts to what Zara was mentioning are the ones that stood out to me as well. And it very much made me think of like the internal push and pull, this dialogue that's happening like within myself of kind of pulled towards these worldly sense pleasure pursuits. Then this other part of me who sees who can see clearly the futility in it, the suffering in it. But it's just this ongoing, I don't know, push and pull, and particularly as what Zara was referencing as well, of this thing where they're saying to the Bodhisattva, like, just go enjoy all these sense pleasures, indulge in it as much as you can. Look at this chance, look how beautiful these women are, look at XXXYZ, whatever. And then when you're older, you can do it. Then if you want, you can go do your little spiritual thing or something. And the degree to which, like, if I had to be really honest, like that's what I tell myself kind of on some level. I try not to, and I'm trying not to do that. That's why I'm here. But there is this kind of implicit thing in the background of like, all right, well, maybe tomorrow or maybe next year when I'm older than I am now, then I'll like really buckle down and like really practice in a more sincere way. But, now like, let's have fun. Let's do this. Let's work another 10 hours. Let's, indulge in this pleasure or something like that. That all of that part really spoke to me, and the internal kind of push and pull that goes on within me.
Yes, thank you. Do you think that there's an element of asking to justify the delusions of Chanda's, asking, the Bodhisattva to justify his delusions of grandeur, to say, "Oh, this is such a wonderful life. Why wouldn't you want to lead this life? You're blowing my mind. Why would you want to leave this?" He doesn't fathom, the depth of what the Bodhisattva is feeling and thinking.
Yeah, I think so. If I'm understanding your question right, um, I think there's really something to that. And then as it relates with other people, there's something very similar. And again, I might be misinterpreting what you mean, but something very similar with like when someone's getting sober, where it becomes very uncomfortable for the other people in their life who are still in that mode, where it's like when they're expressing either their desire to be sober or just their sobriety in and of itself gets this pushback from the other people because it holds a real mirror up to what they're doing, the other people in their life in this way that's uncomfortable. And I can imagine something similar when someone's maybe pursuing some kind of more spiritual pursuit or something where there can be this pushback from other people who are more engaged in this sense pleasure world, because it kind of holds a mirror up to it and makes people look at it like, oh yeah, maybe this isn't going to give me the satisfaction or something. But I'm not sure if that's what you were alluding to or not, but that's what it's
Oh, indeed, yes, absolutely. That's part of it, yeah. And I think that I just kind of lost my thought. It was just that, well, I'll come back to that, but I thought that, he stated his motivation wasn't a selfish motivation. The Bodhisattva, he said, look at all the suffering, look at all these suffering beings and so on. And this is why I'm doing it. This is my real motivation. I've gone through all these other things, but it didn't help my situation. It didn't help anybody else's situation. But here's something that I can contribute to, that I can be part of, that will help other beings. And the thought that I was trying to remember before was that he's ready to, it's not said here, but he's ready to change his friends. He's ready to change his family, because we want to surround ourselves with people who, are thinking similarly, and not pulling us down and so on. And we don't want to make other people uncomfortable either. And there needs to be some kind of an understanding of what he's doing, what the motivation is. And for people, if they want to follow this, they need to make similar kinds of sacrifices or changes in their life. Maybe it's not considered to be sacrifices, but positive changes in their life that removes them from unwholesome behavior and so on.
I was curious for, I guess, anyone else, this is just an open more question, because Matt, the way you just kind of phrased that, I kind of come in and out of that mindset, even though like I'm 44 and like I'm like, oh, I can, practice, come in and out. Like I've come in contact with the Dharma. I understand it, right? Like that's a blessing. And oh, I can pick this up after I finish my career, right? Because right now, like the type, the type of work I do and stuff. So there's like moments where I'm just like, I just want to go home and not even go back to certain things, where I just want to go home and just meditate, right? And just not be selfish, but just be plateaued where I am now, if that makes sense. Not go to any further, just hold where I am. Like that thought, but then I realized like that kind of going back to some of these basic things of like, this is such a precious moment, right? Like death can come at any moment, and do your best every day to try to up level, right? Like if it's one more passage or one more whatever it is that you can do. But I wonder for the rest of you, like Bernie or Alex, certainly Lance or Gary, like have you guys had these periods where you've come in and out where you have plateaued, right? Where you're like, life is too overwhelming, being human, and I need to take a break for like a year or two. And then I'm just curious, because like I find myself having thoughts like that, but then I also think like that's Mara, right? That's the ego, like that's the whole game, right? To pull you out and pull you back into it. So it's more of a question from anyone else who wants to share wisdom.
That's the way we live. That's the way we live. That's, I guess, what we're seeking shelter from. We walk out into the storm every day, or we see it on the screen in front of us, and we begin to process it. And that's where the trouble begins. It's you can't avoid the world, but you have to decide what to make of it and decide what it will make of you. And we see this every day. You know what I'm talking about? I see people rushing around looking for a reason to be, looking for a reason to matter. And it seems to me that I see many people, and sometimes it includes me, stepping into the abyss of what afflicts them rather than walking away from it. I hear myself talking sometimes. I feel myself watching or listening sometimes. I feel my frustration and anger growing at people who are suffering at their own hands. And I realize that I'm just like them sometimes. And I recognize the wisdom of Pogo, the cartoon philosopher of my youth. We have met the enemy, and it is us.
Very good. Thank you. Bernie, would you like to comment on that?
Uh, I've been listening to everybody. It's, as you said in the beginning, it's a pretty straightforward discussion between the pleasures of the world and the pull to seek for enlightenment. And it's an old story. I suppose everybody who's left home and become a monk or a nun has gone through this story. Of course, those of us who are still ensnared in sense pleasures like myself, uh, we're, well, if not enjoying my consorts, at least I'm enjoying my Netflix. So, uh, but it's a pretty straightforward dialogue. It's just kind of exaggerated from the great pleasures that a prince of a wealthy kingdom would enjoy versus an ordinary person. So I don't know that there's much more to add to it than that.
I think Czar was trying to get at the point of, in your lifetime and being a practitioner as you've been all these years and so on, did you come to, times when you kind of maybe plateaued or you compromised or you realized that you were compromising or you were rationalizing and saying, "Oh, I've done enough," or something like that? Have you come to periods like that, and how did you navigate through those?
Well, in my life, of course, I've been interested in different things, and there's only enough hours in the day to pursue all the things that you'd like to pursue. So definitely there have been times in my life when I've been spending more of my effort in pursuing other activities, first with my job and then with all my other hobbies and activities. Right now, I'm spending a good deal of time learning Spanish, but yeah, certainly uh, since the beginning, well, not since near the beginning, I've made it a point to practice every day, but sometimes more than others. So that's generally how it's gone.
Do you think that there's a practical balance between an ordinary life, an ordinary being, and a spiritual life, putting oneself onto the pathway of becoming a bodhisattva and so on, and that, it's not a either or situation, it's a blend.
Well, obviously, the answer is to practice as much as you can. I mean, the more time you can devote to your Dharma practice, first, the study of Buddhism, and second, the actual meditation practice, the better. I'd be a hypocrite to say that I am spending all hours of my day practicing the Buddha Dharma, because I'm not. So the balance has to come from you. It depends upon your interests and your and how much interest you do have in the Dharma. Not everybody is going to go all out and do a long retreat. It's up to each individual to decide how much time they want to devote and to schedule their day accordingly. It's I mean, this is said in many disciplines. People will tell you, well, I don't have enough time to do so and so. Well, nobody has anything more than 24 hours a day. It depends how you portion your time out. How much time are you going to devote to this activity, and how much time you're going to devote to that activity? So that's where the balance comes in. It's deciding how you're going to schedule the different activities in your life.
I'd like to ask Alex the same question, but I just want to interject one other thought, and that is that not all our things that we do they're not necessarily non-virtuous. We can be doing different things that aren't directly, ascribed to being Buddha Dharma, but yet they're practical things of being a human being and enjoyable things and so on like that, or maybe helpful things to help other people, and finding that balance. If it's the extreme of doing very negative things, well, that's a different issue, I think. But I don't think any one of us are really doing that. But is there do we consider that? Oh, if I'm learning to do Spanish, if I'm going to take time learning Spanish, is that taking away from my Dharma time? Am I taking time from that, and I'm not being as good a Dharma student as I should be because I want to learn Spanish or guitar or whatever it is, our vocations or advocations?
Well, that's living, and I think that those can be good things to do. And I think that you can practice even in those activities. You can find a way to project your practice into those things. It's
Yeah.
other vicissitudes of life that intervene that take us even away from our positive non-dharma activities.
They become expressive channels for you.
Yes.
Alex, you want to comment on this? Are you with us?
Yeah, sure. I enjoy and admire even some of what have been just said by everybody, starting from Zara. And I very much subscribe to basically everything that was said. I could have said it myself as well. No, I just want to add maybe one more thing. That one of yes, we no matter what activity we take, there will be some sort of plateau in terms of improving, getting better at it, and like my sensei in martial arts have been talking extensively about that. That there is going to be this plateau. No matter what style you study or what art you take up on, but then you have to really like refine your art, and sometime there's going to be another breakthrough. So how do we but what do we do? How do we go about it? I cannot say like that I have made a lot of breakthroughs in my lives. Maybe there were a couple, but like one of the things that could probably help, that was suggested by one of the Rinpoches that I respect very much, and he like it's not in answering that particular question, but like it was a general teaching which I took as an answer to this question, and that is anything that you do or you take upon yourself, even walking upstairs or downstairs, we can think of it as for the Dharma or for the benefit of other beings. Like for example, I'm going upstairs, I'm going to strengthen my legs, right? And why? Well, maybe I'm going to help with somebody. Maybe I'm going to help build some temple, carrying stuff when there is opportunity. Or I'm just going to be generally more healthier. Or if I learn Spanish language, I can maybe talk Dharma to other Spanish-speaking people who don't speak English. Or like I watch Netflix movies, and any piece of wisdom I get from them, I'll have for myself, but I can also share with others. So like any activity we can think of, we can do with intention of advancing on the Dharma path and helping others advancing on their path. So that's probably the most I can say today.
Well, very good.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that we need to do, is constantly be evaluating ourselves, looking at ourselves, and I just jotted down just 4 words that would help in my life. Things that I thought of. What conviction? What's the level of my conviction? For that which I wish to do, this or that, or something else. Where's my conviction with that? And another word is seduction. How am I being seduced by this, that, my desire or whatever, my jealousy or whatever? Am I being seduced by that? And then, where's my compromise? What am I compromising in? What are the choices, and how am I behaving with that? And then the last one is rationalization. How do I rationalize this? And I think that's something that we are very easy to do. It's very, we're sophisticated people, and we can rationalize many things and so on. So I think that those are just words that used to be able to help me to evaluate, my decisions, what it is that I'm doing, how I'm spending my time, and so on like that. So I'll bring it back to you, Zara. What do you think of all that? Your microphone is muted.
Sorry. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a commitment to lifestyle changes. And I think kind of like you had said this, and I think Matt was saying it as well in another way. It's like you have to make a commitment that you are changing to an extent. Obviously, you can't change your mother and father, your brothers and sisters, right? The people that are blood related to you, or if you have children, but you have to evaluate your environment and make a commitment to those changes in order to kind of support. I think that's where at least my wisdom is coming, is supporting who and what you're around, right? Like if I had to pick the lowest hanging fruit, is making a very distinct decision. Like if you're a smoker, like whatever, it's like, I don't go to a bar anymore, right? It's just like black or white. Like instead I go to the beach and do a nature walk, right? Those sorts of things. I think those is probably the biggest wins, because then that naturally starts a shift. Because if you're not around that, then you're not going to be drinking because there's no alcohol on your beach walk, hypothetically. But that, I think, alludes to something you had mentioned. I think Matt was mentioning it in some of his discussion about substance abuse. I think that was the biggest win for me, is that shift. And I think the hardest rip was recognizing I had to let go of certain friendships, not because people were bad, but because it was a natural change or evolution. When you're spiritually up leveling, it is really important that if you want to be bodhicitta, you do have to be very aware of where your prana or your energy is flowing, and who's consuming it. If it's not your occupation and your personal or social dharma, like the work you should be doing, that's easiest. I do think you have a distinct responsibility to be very aware of where your energy is flowing and discerning. For the people that are closest to you that are going to take up your heart energy, like my mom and dad take a lot of heart energy, but I should be aware of other relationships. But then that allows you to do the work of bodhicitta, right? Like where you're more able to spread love and joy versus having one or two people, like I call it energy vampires, who are taking and consuming like one or two people in your life. And that requires discernment and a commitment to every day when you take those vows, the Bodhisattva action bodhicitta, you actually have to say, okay, instead of me having this personal friendship that's draining most of my week through gossip, I'm gonna not water that and keep that energy so I can use it and spread it more widely, because then I'll be more present and not consumed with this person's dramatic storyline. And then you have to be able to rip that within yourself and recognize it. And that was a really hard shift for me, Lance, was letting go of certain, I'll just call them energy vampire relationships. I don't know if that's relatable to anyone.
Well, I think it's an interesting point, and I think that, there's two things come to my mind about that. And one is, setting limits, with those kinds of relationships. How much can I give to that person, before I have to say, I can't give any more, at least in this session, and not give up the relationship, because there's something to be learned in the relationship. That's the other point. They might learn something about you in the way that you deal with them, but you also are learning something from them about how to deal with, those particular sets of causes and conditions that have brought them to where they are, and how better, we become at being able to penetrate that, to help them, and to help ourselves to help other people, and so on. So I think, having a structure to allow us to be able to frame that and create, the boundaries that we need to do is helpful. Because people they are like, situations are like vampires, or whatever the expression was you used. I want to make another point, and that is that the thing I think in this section here, the Bodhisattva was really, talking about, that he had been an ordinary person, and they didn't say it this way, but through his good fortune and good deeds and merit and so on like that, he had gotten to this point. But he was definitely making the point that he was an ordinary person. He had seen all these choices that he had before him. He saw those choices from other experiences. So one question I have, and maybe Bernie, because he, he's been doing this longer than I have, but the question of how literal do we take this? Because, the question of past lives always comes up. And maybe I'm still dubious about this mystical ability to be able to see past lives. Or is it more of a transpersonal investigation, that we're able, through our experience, to be able to see and recognize the lives of other human beings and say, oh, I have empathy for that. Oh, I understand that. Maybe I, in some mystical way enjoyed that or suffered that in past lives. Or maybe it's just my intellectual power to be able to comprehend that and be able to understand it and be able to resolve that into my life now. What do you think about that, Bernie?
Well, the question is, how literally should we take
Well, how
knowledge?
literally do you take it? Let's put it that way.
Well, I believe in reincarnation, but I don't like to say uh, anything which I haven't experienced is definitely the truth. You know, I want to be a little more cautious than to try to tell something, say that something is so that I don't really can't say it's true from my experience. Now, what was I going to say about that? There are instructions. If you read the texts like the Path of Purification on how to remember your previous lives, and it's always dependent on achieving high states of meditation, like the different jhana levels. And you're not likely to be able to attain knowledge or any kind of special abilities from without first attaining a very deep and profound state of meditation. And since I'm no longer there, not yet there, not no longer there, uh, I can't say, you know, what you can achieve if you are a really profound meditator can achieve very deep, profound meditation levels. So I can't say from personal experience that I've ever met somebody who's convinced me that they had knowledge of their previous lives, although I've read a few stories about people who supposedly remember their previous lives, but you always wonder whether they're just fooling themselves or not. So I'll just have to leave it at that. If that's what your question was. Now, the practical utility of all that, I'm not sure how useful it is to be able to do that. Now, supposedly, if
To
you're
be able to do what? Wait a minute, I lost.
to to remember your own previous lives or the lives previous lives of other people. Now, I suppose if you were a spiritual teacher, it might come in handy sometime to deal with somebody's problems to know what they had done or where they had been in previous lives. So, but for an ordinary person like me, it really doesn't seem to have much practical utility. Now, did I tell you? No, I didn't tell you. I might as well tell you. I went to Lama Dawa used to live at the Towson Dharma house. He was a Nakpa who originally from Nepal. His father was a Nakpa too. And he came to Baltimore the first time he came to Baltimore. He offered like divinations. So you could go and ask him several questions about stuff, and he would have a mirror in a little like cup of rice, and he would say a prayer, and he would sprinkle a few grains of rice in front of the mirror, and he would look in the mirror, and he would answer your question. So I went to the divination more to support him than anything else because he charged $50 to do the divination. I knew he needed the money. So the first question I asked him, since I really didn't have any important questions to ask, was who was I in a previous life? And he said, I was a writer who lived in Canada, and my name was John Howard. And I tried looking it up online, and it's such a common name in Canada, in Toronto specifically, in Toronto especially. So I have no idea whether it's true or not. But I got a few doubts about it because I next asked him about my health. And so he gave me a diagnosis in terms of Tibetan medicine. But then when I went to see another Lama later who was a Tibetan doctor. My mind is terrible with names, but he was a high Rinpoche, and he came to Towson as well. He just sort of laughed and he said, that diagnosis doesn't make any sense. So I don't know how much trust I can put in Lama Dao's mirrored divinations. So that's just a story to tell you. It's more a humorous story than anything else, but since you asked.
Does anybody else have any stories you'd like to relate, in terms of past lives or visualizations of experience with past lives or anything? Or
Bernie, I thank you so much. You always bring my heart to a smile with your anecdotes, so thank you for that one.
Well, that's one of the perils of old age. You've got lots of stories and you want to tell everybody the stories of your life. So I try to refrain myself usually, but sometimes I figure it'd be entertaining to tell other people.
Well, just to sow a seed or two, and as we progress along our study career of the Buddha Dharma and so on, and as we embark in the Mahamudra, the mind of the Buddha, to just give a quick, easy definition of it, clairvoyance is a feature of that, and to consider that, to put that as part of the stepping stones that you're using, on the path to liberation and so on, clairvoyance and how you use that and how you don't use that. It may not be like a soothsayer or a someone who lies down on a bed of nails, to extract, money from the audience or something like that. But just very common, easy things, where you just have a sense about people that you meet. And some people are very easy to have that kind of sense with, and some people are just like, stone walls. They're very, you don't get anything from them. But to develop that sense of clairvoyance, to recognize other people, but also it's really recognizing yourself, what direction you can move in, what is good for you. It's not our job to be able to go around and be analyzing other people all the time. It's our job to rid ourselves of our own ego or control our own ego. So the clairvoyance helps us in order to do that.
Lance, I was an earthworm. I already told Lance that. I'm certain I was an earthworm. Bernie, I knew Bernie would laugh.
I think I was whatever's one thing below an earthworm is what I would be. An earthworm servant or something. But I was thinking like with I'm also very or aware, I don't know, skeptical, maybe sometimes too skeptical of different claims or maybe supernatural things. But one thing that certainly made me keep more of an open mind about it was the stories, particularly early on when I was getting interested in spirituality and Eastern spirituality. Ram Dass had a big influence on me, and his stories and then many other people kind of within that circle, stories of their guru, Maharaji Neem Karoli Baba, who kind of constantly displaying this clairvoyance. And so it's kind of like, I don't know what to do with that. I mean, I believe Ram Dass when he says it, and the other people. So that was something that made me keep more of an open mind. I feel like as I get older, the less sure I am about things, the more open-minded maybe I am towards some things like this.
In the weeks past, we've been talking about, we brought up energy, and the energy, maybe is a way of explaining, what this continuum, this tantric continuum we talk about, this vibration that we're all part of, that we use that as an analogy, for lack of better words, but there is this flow of energy, and it's, the part of the phenomenal nature, it's the the Einstein theory of relativity. Energy equals, the mass of taking a mass and moving it twice the speed of sound, and there will be a release of energy, and so on. We're all part of energy. There's energy all around us, and so on. And being able to think in terms of that energy, or to be able to meditate in terms of that energy, to be able to rest the body, to be able to rest that mass, and be able to use that, and that energy that's released, to use that energy in a spiritual way, in a way that goes beyond the relative, that goes beyond the phenomenal, that goes beyond E equals MC squared. And I think, that's what we do. And we say this many times, it's non-conceptual and it's inexpressible. You have to experience it.
Lance, is this why certain people are able to get very little sleep, because they're meditating with such focus during the daytime that when they go to sleep at night, they only need like 4 hours or so, like where their body goes into a deeper sleep, and then they're...
I don't really know. I don't know. I don't know what other sacrifices they're making in their life to do that. I don't know.
I've heard that with like when you reach a certain jhana level that like you accomplish calm abiding, that's the case. I know Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the late Lama Zopa Rinpoche, was said to need very little sleep. It's something I've heard people say. I don't know all the ins and outs.
And some of the lamas don't lie down to sleep. They're in the meditation position. They're in the Vajra position and remain in that. And that's how they get their sleep rest.
One thing I'm thinking, oh, I'm sorry, Lance, please.
No, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm just sitting here reflecting on the text and everything that I feel like now in our modern culture as it stands right now, that with the that we're in much more like similar situation than the the Bodhisattva version of the Buddha here was in. Because it's like in our modern times, there's an endless access to dopamine stimulating stimuli, in a way that wasn't at other times in history, even not that long ago. Even when I was a kid, it wasn't like this, through the technology and the way that the food is engineered, and the sugar, everything, that it's just like being in an ocean, or just it's like the oxygen we breathe. It's like the dopamine spiking stimuli, it's everywhere, and it's endless access to it, and in almost a way that it's almost unimaginable compared to kind of when people were living in a more natural time or something like that, would only have these brief moments of this. So it's almost like living in this palace with being, showered with endless riches and women or men or whatever, so there's something almost more relatable about it, I think.
That's a really good point, Matt. I had never thought of it from that perspective, but that is a great analogy, because that would be like having like a cell phone, right? Where you can literally like get a hit, like I want the flute, play your flute player, this beautiful woman, right? On demand, right? These on-demand stimuli, but obviously the tangible version, but that's actually, hadn't thought about that. So he would have faced a similar challenge in that way, like constant deflection of dopamine hits, or letting all that go and ripping it. So thank you for pointing that out.
In the 12 vows that the Bodhisattva who became medicine Buddha, we recite that when we do the medicine Buddha practice, the 12 vows, and part of it is being satisfied with what you have. And that what you have is like riches and jewels and so on like that. When you don't need anything else, if all you have is this one thing, this thing becomes very valuable to you. So our life, if all we have is this one life, and how do we live this one life? Do we live it as a jewel? Or do we take it for granted and let this jewel be covered up with mud that we know is there? We know we're doing non-virtue. We know that we're doing negative things. We know that we're not living to the utmost of what we can do and so on, and we rationalize that and so on like that. Instead of realizing, wow, I just have this one life. I really got to do the highest thing I can do. And to that, the last page that we read, 15.93, to that last page there, it starts off with the Bodhisattva talking about the ship of Dharma, going from one shore to another via the ship of Dharma, is how we move and so on. And then Chanda, his charioteer, says, well, is your resolve on this, is it based on conviction? What's it based on? And then Chanda, and then the Bodhisattva says, Chanda, he says, I will listen to about my resolve. He says, I will strive to benefit and liberate beings. And my resolve is like a mountain, immutable, unchangeable and firm. It is as difficult to move as Meru, the king of mountains. And then Chanda says, well, how can you be so certain? And then he goes on and explains that. So my point is that reading this last page that we read really becomes the answers that we've been talking about here, that we've been talking around and hitting on. And here the Bodhisattva is expressing them. So these sutras are very valuable. Yes, Alex.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. But maybe before we go too far in that direction, I just want to come back to dopamine and the plateau. I think, like, my perception is that we think we're hitting the plateau. It's because there is no longer dopamine that's being produced or released. Like, whatever we do doesn't cause huge amount of dopamine, so to speak, to be released. And the dopamine is basically, it always released when you get any kind of new experience or something that feels like a new experience. So in terms of, I think, spiritual progress, there are stages where we learn a lot of new things, and it feels like we're going up, 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 up. But then at some point, we learn most of the available things, and from the learning stage, now it will become like a polishing stage, or perfection or refining stage. And that's where those little things, like I think somebody was pointing out, there are so many little things, and Lance, I think you did too, that we need to improve, that we need to perfect. And it's not only in spiritual progress. If you think about, like, publishing a scientific paper, you may come upon some kind of discovery, but to present it to people so they also understand it, and also they can reproduce it, and they trust everything that you did, to recognize this as, yes, this is a new discovery. There is a lot of work that is kind of boring, that needs to be done, but it's not standing in place. It's not plateau. This is the necessary things that has to be done, and we improve ourselves and make a lot of good things along the way. It seems like a plateau, but it's not really a plateau. And I think the same for spiritual progress. It can be applied to anything. So yeah, that what I just wanted to
Would you say
bring
that
about.
that dopamine is, to use the vernacular, is it like a dopamine rush or buzz or a sense of intensity of activity, mental activity or bodily activity, or is it a resting? Is it a peace
In terms of in relation to what?
into somebody who's experiencing that?
Oh, yeah, well, like dopamine. Actually, dopamine has. It's like a lot. There is a lot of urban legend around dopamine. It's really not something that necessarily associated with pleasure. I mean, also released when we get pain, right? It is something that our neural cells produce to tell us, oh, this is something new, and we better pay attention and become more alert to that. Okay, so uh, like either good thing happens to you or bad things happen to you, dopamine is released so the nervous system is paying more attention. What is going on? So and activate all our functions, especially nervous functions. So
Well,
it's
Zara may be able to answer my question on this because she's quite athletic and she does, running marathons and things like that. Isn't that one of the things that happens for long distance runners? They get a particular rush or something like that. Is that dopamine? Can you
I think that's the endorphins.
or the endorphins?
oh
Yeah.
yes, endorphins or endocannabinoids. These are totally different things. And yes, that's what happens at the end. Not for everybody, but for some marathon runners. It was just discussed somewhere. But Zara, maybe you have your personal experience. I would like to hear.
No, I mean that's true, and it is to me. It's and this kind of just goes back to common sense, like the precious human body, everything in moderation. So like exercise, being out in the sun, all those are actually meant to be protective, so that you can keep your physical vessel healthy to do the Dharma. And so I don't think it's an accident that some vigorous physical movement produces that, right? Because of the reality of being in the world can be so heavy. And I use the word toxic just more generically, but that within nature, there's all this medicine, right? That you move your body a little bit, walk fast, run, or whatever, get a little bit of a natural biological high and rest a little bit, go back out and do your Dharma. So that's what I've come to think of it as. But I think that's why that is, if that makes sense, the marvel of the precious human body. I just think people take like everything else to extremes, and then you damage your physical vessel, end up with all these knee problems or injuries. So Alex, I don't know if that resonates with you, but the more I think on doing this 3-year retreat, and the more I started thinking about how marvelous the engineering of the body is, in like if you should do these vigorous activities to an extent, because it is protective at a hormonal level. So someone just had a toxic conversation with you and you can go out and do a fast walk, you'll naturally feel better and can reset yourself. So I don't know, that's just, sorry, Lance went off a little bit, but that's my mindset shift now with it. That's why I had told Lance this privately, but I stopped doing athletic events because it was an obsession and compulsion for me. Constantly, like these timing events, like run faster, do this, compete with this person, and I realized it's the illusion of it. Like that's just the ego distracting from, like that's not really the function of exercise and moving the human body. That's just restlessness that's misdirected. And I had to rip that Band-Aid this year because I got so sick last year doing all these marathons and half marathons, and it was very humbling to say like, wow, there's something wrong, right? It was like a huge check. So I had shared that privately with Lance a couple months ago that I stopped and just functionally exercise, and my life is better now. I'm happier, Lance.
Good.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Zara. Like we also had, like I do martial arts, and we all oftentimes talk about this like natural high after this workout, and yeah, this is this kind of amazing thing that you move around and you feel so good, really. But it is different from kind of like doing something and then achieving your goal and feeling good because of that. You're not feeling better, quote unquote, because you did something or you did something better than others. Um, I mean, the body just naturally sends you, it's kind of like a good sort of like feedback loop that you did something good, healthier for your body, and there is like a reward mechanism inside that will help you to do the same thing again. But that being said, if it is done for the sake of dopamine, for the sake of doing something better than others, or even better than yourself, and then telling, oh, I really did better than myself, I achieved something good, that kind of attitude will eventually lead to self-destruction, or partially self-destruction in a way. So we have to be careful there, in that way. And then just like with other things, like we eat food and we feel good after we had a good meal. That is those endocannabinoids or endomorphins that brain produces for us. So we continue eating healthy. Same thing when we go to bathroom. That's the same thing, excellent. Exactly the same thing. Or when we sleep and wake up and feel better. That same thing. There are all these loops that reinforce our own behavior. We're not aware of them, but they are there in the brain. The scientists know about them. Neuroscientists, mostly.
When we talk about the six human realms, and we talk about, we explain it in the terms of the psychophysical drama of being a human being, and how that's expressed in the six human realms, and that the thing that kind of is the rule of that, is within the boundaries, the rule book of how we look at that is the Dharma. And so my question is genetics and physiology then, that would be part of that Dharma, that the Dharma is being expressed, is part of that. It's not just some spiritual thing, some energetic thing that's in between all these things. It is the things themselves. At some level, at some point, it's something that we shouldn't forget, that there is Dharma in genetics. Bernie, you have a thought about that?
Um, Lance, you're trying to tie together science and Buddhism, and that's always a very difficult thing to do. Now, I don't know what to say about that at all. So, I mean, you're asking genetics and its connection, I suppose. If you want to say genetics is associated with karma of rebirth, you choose the parents who have the genetics that you need to express in your next birth. I don't know anything more to say about it than that, unless I missed your point entirely.
Well, I think it can just remain a question. And the point is to look at it and put it into the equations that we're using to be able to analyze, evaluate our lives and so on. At some point, we'll get to exhaustion, and we'll let it go. But you know, but I don't think that we have to. We're not there yet. So it's still something, it's something that somebody brought to my attention and said, oh, well, the Dharma is in the genetics. And it's something that, I said, oh, let me think about that. And nothing wrong with that. That's okay.
Well,
Nothing's out of bounds.
you would think that Dharma is connected at some level with science, but
It's an interesting proposition.
specifically about genetics, I don't know what the connection might be. So it's
I mean, to me, this is all the story of being a human being. I mean, a Buddha is an awakened human being. It's not some supernatural, godlike being that's floating around someplace or penetrating everything or anything like that. It's a realized human being. It's a very simple thing.
sure, but
Lance, was your question or what you were pondering out loud was, is you mean little Dharma, little d or big D in the spiritual, like in our genetics? What did you mean?
Well, that's a good point. But the big D
Yeah,
penetrates the little d, all the little D's.
right.
They're really they're inseparable from each other. But it's the big D that allows you to recognize that. The equality of all things and the absence of any inequality.
Yes, so I would go back to what you just posed to us. I would say yes, that is part of your rebirth. That is wherever you left off is where you jump back in. Right. So the work you've done, that's why each day is so precious, right? Like consume the Dharma, practice it, gain the merit, and then whenever you exit, you do the best you can to hope that you'll re-enter into a great birth with ease, so you can keep doing that work. So I would say yes, and that does impact your physiology, right? How you structurally look, your body, like are you to do certain types of movements versus like being physically disabled, for example, right? I think all those things, which is genetics, I do believe that after having done readings, scripture reading and contemplating it, I don't know if you were posing that as a question, but I would say yes, if you're asking.
Okay, good. Thank you. So anybody else have any comments or topics you want to bring up or questions? Is this
Well, may I just add to this discussion about big Dharma and small Dharma? And to me, like small Dharma is the natural way things go, right? So and things go naturally one way, or things go naturally the other way. We can learn about this, and we can learn all different things. How they arise and decay, how they change and come about, but then there is a bigger Dharma about that helps us to decide what to do in any particular moment and how to kind of direct things so that things happen according to our intention or our aspiration. And I think that's what Big Dharma is teaching us, how, knowing the natural law, how to achieve certain goal, like achieve enlightenment, get away from suffering, overcome, transcend suffering, or like get best of our conditions that we have right now. So I don't know if knowing genetics helps here too. Like what your good genes, what your bad genes, and what perhaps like unknown genes, and all that. There is a lot of junk DNA that's not really junk, but it's actually like regulatory DNA and all that. And it works not by itself, but it works together with the environment. So how we control our environment also depends on what genes are expressed and what genes, how they behave and how we use them.
Well, I just looked it
Maybe
up.
that's all I want to say.
I just looked it up in the Shambhala dictionary or encyclopedia here, and the Sanskrit, the literal translation of dharma is carrying or holding.
So it's a verb. It comes across as just an action word, just a verb.
You know, I've always looked at it as a pathway. You know, there's many different pathways, you know, that have all these rules and logical ways to do things, you know, to be a carpenter or to be a lawyer or whatever, you know, be a family member, you know, there's a dharma for that. But then the Buddha dharma is how to be able to turn that around within yourself, see yourself, and to be able to purify yourself, to be able to liberate yourself from the psychophysical drama.
As far as Zara's point goes, in the traditional Sanskrit grammar, all words are originally derived from verbal roots. So the verbs are the basic building blocks of everything in Sanskrit. So every noun is going to have a verb as a root. And the root for dharma is dur, which means to hold. And generally it's used in the sense of like to hold the law, you know, hold the proper behavior or something like that.
Bernie, do you think this is more of just a pondering or wondering because of the focus on action, like karma, right? Like karma itself is like that's action, like a verb.
Karma, the word karma comes from the verb which means to do. So generally it's translated as action. So
And well, like the Sanskrit language, right? Like being like this huge, like the cultural byplay of karma, and then all these words, like just kind of
yeah.
formulating. Do you think that there's some correlation there? Like a focus on action words because of that, of the spiritual idea of
Well,
karma?
that gets into the idea that our reality is shaped by our language, which is, you know, like the Worf-Shapiro hypothesis, to get a little technical. And I don't know to the extent that it's true. Sanskrit or the Indo-European languages were around for a lot longer than Buddhism or Hinduism, at least in their modern form. But I'd have to say that the language itself sort of colored Buddhism in terms of thinking in terms of process instead of substances. But that's just speculation on my part.
You ever hear the you know, form and function? Does form come from function, or does function come from form?
Yeah, well, you know, I wouldn't push the whole thing too far because we're just talking about the formal rules of grammar of what's his name, Panini, I guess. But yeah, there's a kind of Buddhist analysis where you try to understand what a concept is by analyzing the word that is used to express it, and they break it down into the verb. And sometimes they give you a lot of false or supposedly false derivations of the word. But yeah, you'll see in Buddhist texts and Buddhist philosophy, a lot of times you see the effort to understand a concept by understanding the grammar behind the word that is used to represent the concept. And the big example of that is conditioned co-production, or pratya samutpada, where they give a whole long definition in terms of breaking that compound up into its component parts. But I don't know that it's pretty stupid. It's pretty esoteric stuff. It's not really that important. So, but it's interesting if you know a little bit about Sanskrit.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. This is always interesting. I love the way that, our discussions kind of weave in and out and grow up and down and so on like that. I think it's really good. All right. So, next week we'll continue where we are. We'll continue with 15.100. I think what we can do is all the verses in this next part are all short verses. So we can get through these next 100 and some pages or 100 and some verses very easily. They're only in maybe 10 pages, maybe not even that. And so we'll be able to do that. So if you want to read ahead, I think that'd be great. Make some notes in the margins or something so we can have a good discussion. And I'll look forward to seeing you all again next week. So, Bernie, please, you're the Umze this evening. Would you do our dedication prayer, please?
Okay, let me turn to the back of the book.
And I want to wish Gary a bon voyage.
Oh,
Tomorrow he's
okay.
embarking on his trip to Australia.
Oh, wow.
Have a safe trip, and we hope from time to time he can join us, although it's 15, 16-hour time difference between us. But maybe he can see us on YouTube, and he's gonna be gone for a few months.
I'll be on for 3 months. Lori and I are going to welcome our 2 brand new grandsons into the world. Who will,
Where are you going? What part?
well, we'll be tomorrow. We'll be going to Melbourne,
Hmm.
in Dallas. So it's a long trip, and then my daughter and her husband live in a little town called Echuca, which is about 2.5 hours north of Melbourne, roughly. Um, and and she seems to be doing fine, so we're looking forward to getting there. I have to admit that I haven't been on that long a flight since I was a very young man, and I didn't like it then, so I don't expect that to like it now.
It'll be fine. Bring back a kangaroo and a koala bear.
Well, uh, they may be kind of hard to handle and hard to get on the plane, but
All right. Have a safe trip. Come back safe.
thank you.
The
Our best wishes.
dedication, okay, the dedication prayer by Lord Jigten Sumgon on page 36 of the new prayer book. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind, root, and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana and the innate root of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachments to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such, and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I in any case gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om Ahum, Om Ahum, Om Ahum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Thank you all. Thank you, Bernie.
Safe travels, Gary.
Yep.
Bye bye, everyone.
Good night.
Hey,
Bye,
have a good
everyone.
night. Okay.